Okay, so in the last video, we created our first HTML file and we created a very, very basic example of some markup. But this technically wasn't very good. You wouldn't want to just start creating elements on the page and doing what we just did. You're going to want a document layout. Now, document layout basically, first of all, tells the browser what kind of document it is, and that's by the doc type. You can imagine putting them two words together, document type, doc type. We're then going to have a head to our page, which is where we're going to put things like links to our style sheets, meta tags, which we'll learn about later. Then we're going to create a body element, which is where we're going to store the body of our document, as you would probably guess. And we'll look at things like title as well. So to start with, we need to choose a doc type. Now, previously to HTML5, you may have heard of HTML5. You had HTML4 and previous to that, other versions. Now, these aren't versions like they come out and there's a brand new load of features. Browsers have to implement this functionality based on W3C specs, and we'll talk about that later as well. So the HTML5 doc type is extremely simple. You may have seen really long doc types before if you have ever looked at HTML. But we do this. We say exclamation mark after an opening tag. We say doc type, and this can be capitalized. It doesn't matter at all. HTML. That is an HTML5 doc type. So we're telling the browser this page can support HTML5 elements. We are probably going to use HTML5 elements like header, footer, things that weren't previously available. So that's telling us the type of document. Now, surrounding our entire page, we need HTML tags. So we start off like this, we come down a couple of lines, and we say this. Now, this you can indent, and previously we looked at the paragraph element, which we wouldn't. It makes sense to indent here because it just looks a lot neater. So what we now need is our head of our document and our body of our document. So we're going to say head, like so. And then I'm going to come down a line and I'm going to open and close my body tags. So let's just pull these down. We're going to fill in here in the head what kind of things do we need? We need a title. Now the title, if we just look at our page at the moment, you'll see absolutely nothing. The title at the moment showing in the browser is index.html, which isn't very useful to a user. And it's also equally unuseful to indexers like Google's indexer when it indexes your website to be placed inside the Google search index. So we need some kind of title to identify the website. So we're going to say title, and we're opening and closing this tag as well. So we're opening and closing all of the tags that we've created so far, except the doc type, of course. So inside of the title, let's say my website. So when we go ahead and refresh here, you'll notice that the title changes to my website. Cool. And when we hover over, we get this little yellow thing here. So we've now identified the title of this page. Let's go on to look at the body. So inside of the body, we already looked at example before, like creating a paragraph element. So in here, we can do exactly the same thing. So I could say, hello, welcome to my website, and there we go. So now we've created a perfectly valid document layout like so. You might notice that this actually has a little bit of spacing above it now. If we just inspect this, you can see that the orange part is a little bit of spacing. Before we didn't have that when we had our document layout, and that's because technically just putting a paragraph on a page without a document layout wasn't valid at all. So what kind of things happen in the head and what kind of things happen in the body, and why have we separated these? Well, inside of the head, you would do things like load in style sheets. You may, and in very, very rare cases, load in JavaScript. You tend to load in JavaScript at the very bottom of your body. That's because when a browser loads the content and renders the content, it will scan down the page and load resources in as they're hit. So when we load in our style sheets later, they're the first thing that's going to be loaded in. Now, the reason they're the first thing that's loaded in is because before the HTML is shown to the user, we need to see the styles, or the browser needs to see the styles, so it can then say, well, I know what to apply to each of these elements, and the user won't see a flash of non-styled HTML. That's really, really important. Now, the reason we add scripts or JavaScript to the bottom of our body is because that's not required before the page loads, or not in most cases it isn't. So that's what we do. We'll be looking at adding more to the head later, but just a warning, you may have seen something like this before, style tags, and you can see that they've been shown as black inside of my text editor. Style tags will allow you to create CSS in the head and style up elements on this page. However, what the problem with this is that we are creating effectively inline styles. We saw inline styles on Wikipedia as an example before. We saw something like the following, so style, and then you type out your styles just in here. That's bad. The reason being is that it can't be cached properly. If you have an external file, it can be cached by your browser. It doesn't need to be re-downloaded every time you visit a page. However, when you have inline styles, that needs to be loaded every single time, because it's likely that the markup on the page doesn't want to be cached in case you have, say, a news website or something like that, where things are constantly changing. It can't cache that element. I mean, it can cache that content to some extent, but it's much better to separate, like I said before, your markup from your styles. So if you've seen that before, don't follow that example. We'll be doing this properly. So in the next video, speaking about linking in style sheets, we're going to be looking at creating our style sheet. Then we're going to be looking at styling something up within the browser.